Let's bring in I-24 News senior correspondent Bianca Zanini live in studio with us this afternoon. Bianca, talk to us about Russia's response to Finland joining NATO. It's something they didn't want to see, warning against it. Tell us more.
Well, it's showing its dissatisfaction already in many ways, both in rhetorics and in warnings. It says that it's going to be strengthening its military presence on the border with Finland. And in addition to this, in late March, Moscow announced plans to station tactical nuclear weapons in neighboring Belarus. It says it will construct, it has begun already, constructing a special facility to store these weapons. It's going to be ready by the end of July. And now Russian defense minister has come out and said that these Belarusian aircraft have been upgraded to be able to carry out nuclear strikes as well in direct response to NATO's expansion. Moscow has warned that that it sees a growing NATO as a direct threat and that it will respond accordingly to this. Now, there's an interesting addition to this. Yesterday, former U.S. President Bill Clinton said in an interview that he feels partially responsible for the war in Ukraine because he was the one who convinced Ukraine back in the 90s to give up its nuclear weapons. And he believes that Russia would not have invaded Ukraine if Kiev still had nuclear weapons. So we're also seeing, as we've seen before, once again, a short-term U.S. policy having long-term effects.
Bianca Zanini, we're going to keep you here and go to this next story now. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is in Poland for an official visit with one of his country's closest allies. Zelensky expected to be at the presidential palace, where Ukrainian and Polish leaders will deliver a joint address in the evening. The leaders also hold talks with the president and prime minister and sign a number of bilateral agreements. Let's bring back in Bianca Zanini. Bianca, moving on to Poland now. What's to come of this trip? He doesn't travel outside of the country often, so what's he looking for?
Right, it's not just any visit. Zelensky, as you mentioned, has barely been traveling, if at all. It's the first trip to Poland, even though these two countries are neighbors, since the beginning of the war. And Warsaw is not just one of Ukraine's closest allies. It has also been one of the staunchest supporters, campaigning again and again for more money and more weapons, tanks to Ukraine. President Biden, if you remember, held a speech in Warsaw leading up to the one-year anniversary of the war. So Poland has really become this major symbol of support for Ukraine in Europe, much like Belarus has become the symbol for support for Russia. So we're seeing these two countries playing this part. Zelensky is, as you mentioned, set to address the Polish community there, the Polish people, but also the about 1.5 million Ukrainian refugees that are in Poland right now. Just as the war began in the first months following, there were almost 3 million Ukrainians in Poland because the two share a border. Now it's down to 1.5 million, but still a very big base. So it is definitely an important trip for Zelensky. We also heard from NATO's Jens Stoltenberg that Zelensky has now been invited to participate or to be present at the NATO summit the yearly NATO summit in Vilnius in Lithuania in July, which is also sending a message to Russia.
I-24 News senior correspondent Bianca Zanini live in studio with us this afternoon.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.